organisations thrive. Today I have the pleasure of James Marshall. Good morning to you, or just about good afternoon to you, James.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good to see you. You are the Managing Director at Spinning Fox, which aims to partner with clients to turn their products, applications and websites into dynamic catalysts for growth and customer satisfaction. And today we're going to be exploring adaptation as a leader in the context of going from office space to 100% remote teams, which we know is really topical, has been for a few years, but has become more topical. And we'll share a bit more about that. Before we get into that conversation, James, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do?
Yeah, a great question. So firstly, thank you, Julian, for having me today. But in terms of, what I love doing, I guess for me, what, gets me excited is ultimately kind of working with people who are facing a challenge in their business, and really kind of getting under the skin of it to work with them to work out how we can tackle that challenge. Maybe there's some new competition in the market which is stealing a lot of market share. Maybe you're losing a lot of customers because of poor user experience of your product or platform or website. So really getting under skin of the challenge, and then working with customers to make improvements, work out how we're going to tackle that, how we're going to address it, and being, I guess, on a bit of a journey with them. I love, what we do becoming a bit of a partnership, and not just to kind of turn up and we just do deliver a project for a client and then that's the end of it. Is really sort of being with them on the journey and seeing the change. We can't take credit for all of the change which happens, because obviously there are other things which happen along the way, but being part of that change for a business. For us, we're very much not driven by necessarily working with big global well-known brands, for example. For us, it's all about the sort of challenge that gets us excited, something where we can make a real genuine difference with customers that we work with, really.
Fantastic. Sounds great. And we're talking today about building this resilience in the context of remote and hybrid teams. I think it'd be good just for context purposes, for your own journey, really, to sort of share that obviously one day you've been in office-based teams and now you're fully remote, but just what that journey is, and just perhaps I'll probably diving along the way, but a little glimmers of what you sort of exposed and were observed through that process.
Definitely. Yeah. I guess why I feel like I can probably talk about this topic is, so I've had a lot of experience in the past of building product design and development teams for some global digital agencies, where I was responsible for sort of building those teams up to deliver account-based work and project-based work for large clients such as Unilever, Nike, HSBC. And I was doing that up until about 2018, and then went into the role that I'm in now, which is managing director of Spinning Fox, which is a digital agency, but we are 100% remote. Always have been from the day that the company started, always intend to be long-term as well. So what we aim to do is, we specialize in product strategy, UX, UI design and development, and really help sort of businesses, I guess, enhance their digital products. Maybe that's improving engagement, customer satisfaction, that sort of thing. But I've built up that experience of building remote teams of strategists, researchers, designers, engineers, developers. So it's put me in that position where I've been able to draw a direct comparison between growing those resilient teams in an office environment, but also those in 100% remote. And I want to stress there, that was kind of building teams that are 100% remote even before COVID. It wasn't like we were forced into that situation of going remote, and we've kind of stayed that way. So even sort of in addition, having that direct contrast at a time where 100% remote wasn't so much of a thing back then. It was quite, it was still pretty new and different to kind of create an agency which is 100% remote with team members scattered, around the world as well. So yeah, I feel like, I guess it's put me in a position where I can talk about it, but also, like you alluded to there, I think it's become quite topical again more recently. So I guess a couple of things. Back in mid-September, you had Amazon telling staff that they needed to get back to the office 5 days a week. I think it is from January 2025. But then in direct contrast to that, you've got Spotify's HR chief, I believe it was, who was reaffirming their work from anywhere policy that they have, and even going as far as saying that staff aren't children, and work is a place that you come to and it's not something that you do, almost like a direct attack on those that are maybe going the other way. So really quite interesting in sort of seeing the differing directions of these, huge corporate companies, and how they have a different stance on these as well.
Yeah, it is an interesting world now, this whole working full stop now, and the fact that people are having choices. And we know that the pandemic accelerated all this. And I know, Prit, you doing this before the pandemic, but the pandemic opened up this opportunity that people can work from home and things can still carry on, which is interesting. And I think that was always that concern whether people will still continue, but also increase that flexibility for people. I'm just curious to know what's the reason for Spinning Fox to be 100% remote. Just out of curiosity, why that was the sort of the
Yeah,
way they kicked it off.
it's a great question. I guess a few options really. One, we didn't want to be tied to a particular location. We wanted to have flexibility of where our teams were. I'm a big believer in that. Actually, it's allowed us to diversify our teams massively and open up potential to employ staff members from differing backgrounds and different experience, rather than being restricted to an office locality where, having worked for numerous years in London, don't get me wrong, you get, a huge diverse pool of talent, but ultimately you are ending up with a lot of people that gravitate to that kind of city type environment. And it's allowed us to work with people in, we have people that have lived in remote parts of Scotland, that originally just wouldn't have been an option to work with them, or again, sort of remote parts of Canada even as well. So it's really allowed us to kind of open up the diversity of the talent pool. So I guess there was that. There are, don't get me wrong, there are benefits to businesses as well to operate in 100% remote capacity. Your overheads are far less. And also, it made us a lot more attractive to attract talent. So this is a card that we kind of used to be able to play when we're recruiting early on, is, this role is 100% remote, and people, gravitated towards that. Obviously, we lost the ability to play that card quite so strongly when COVID came along, but we definitely used it to our advantage. In those early stages, you struggle to attract talent because people don't know who you are. But we definitely sort of saw that as we can use this to our advantage, and just the belief that that was the way the world was going. And then, ironically, obviously, a year later from probably when we started, it was kind of forced upon everybody to be operating in that kind of position as well. So, yeah.
And after you've worked in offices, you've done that sort of classic get up, get to the office, stay there till whatever time,
Yeah.
and do the whole commute. What's been the biggest surprise for you in that transition going from managing office-based teams to remote teams?
Yeah, I guess for I guess a number of things. I guess, well, first of all, I would love to sort of cover what my opinion is of kind of remote working at the moment. And I think there's an interesting thing that a lot of people see remote working still as a privilege. I personally don't think that remote work should be seen as a privilege. I believe that if you hire good, proactive, and reliable employees, then you should really have no concern about employing sort of staff in a remote setting. People often sort of worry, I think, about, are people going to pull their weight? Are they going to be skiving off work and things like that? Where I think for me, if someone is maybe inherently lazy or they're not pulling their weight, that's not going to be any different in a remote environment as it would be in an office environment anyway. I think that you would see that, and the lack of work that somebody's delivering or pulling their weight, whether they were kind of working from home or in an office environment. but you also have to make sure that you're hiring those that are prepared for it as well and suited to it. We have had staff members in the past that, in all honesty, that we've lost because they felt that their social skills have actually come to the point where they are suffering. One individual in particular who left us a few months ago, who she was working with us for 3 years and got to the point where she was like, actually, I need to return to the office. So sometimes these things aren't immediate. People don't realize the impact that it can have on them. So I think you need to be very conscious of that as an individual if you were going into a remote role, but also as a leader in those situations to make sure that you're trying to do as much as you can to minimize. You don't want to be losing staff, ideally, to those.
What just on that social side, because that has always been the sort of challenge, isn't it, in terms of creating those social moments, those water cooler moments, those walking around the office, having lunch together, and we know that building engagement and sort of team collaboration, being sociable, and that relationship piece is really important. How do you manage that in a context of remote working?
Yeah, good question. So there's kind of a few tactics that we try to use, I guess. So we talk regularly. So teams are definitely sort of not working in a silo. So a number of tactics, and this also kind of applies in an office environment as well. But little things like we do a daily stand up at the start of the day. So it gives the team that point where they come together. We discuss, what's been being worked on the day before, what's being worked on, for the rest of that day. It's that moment where everybody can come together and align and then go off and, work and self-manage their workload for the rest of the day, and then come back and align again kind of the next day. I guess a few other little quirky things that we do, a little bit cheesy, but on a Friday we have something that we call Fry-Yay, where we all get together and we just hang out and we chat about what's going on, maybe in the world, what plans we've got over the weekend, just a little bit of social, like you said, those kind of almost water cooler moments as a team. I think that they make a big difference. And also other things like we do a bi-weekly show and tell. So everybody has a 5 to 10 minute window where they can turn up and show the team what they've been working on. And it gives an opportunity where maybe team members aren't working in exactly the same teams, them to see what other teams are working on, give suggestions, input, just kind of allows that kind of sharing environment. But also, whilst I'm saying that we're 100% remote, we also know when it's important to come together. So we do try to get all the team together a few times across the year. Maybe that's around developing the strategy of the company as well. So something that's really worked well for us is, and this is a big learning that I've had, is not to go off in a little bit of a silo and work on the company's strategy that you want to work towards over the next year, 3 years. Bring your team and get them involved in that. So they've really sort of helped craft that vision. And yes, ultimately, I might have an idea in my head of where I want us to be going strategy wise. But involving that team has often sort of shown that we end up slightly left or right of what I had envisaged. And it is the best way to have team members bought in and aligned to kind of that vision of what you stand for as a business, what you're all trying to achieve, because they've helped form it. It's not somebody standing up in front of you and saying, this is what we stand for, this is what we're doing as a business. They've been on that journey with you. Now, I fully appreciate that that doesn't work if you're a company of thousands of people. Okay, maybe there are slightly kind of watered down tools that you could use along that way. But maybe it's you are involving, the most senior members of the business. I think getting their buy-in and alignment and having them sort of involved in it then allows them to cascade it down clearer into their team. And I think in my experience, when I was coming up with kind of the vision of where we wanted the business to go, and then coming back and telling the team, I was finding I was having to repeat it time and time again to get that kind of alignment, because it's just harder in a remote setting. So I think that that's one thing that has worked really, really well for us. Arguably, that might have been the same in a remote in an office-based situation as well. But it's paid massive dividends for us in terms of getting that alignment in what we're doing as a business.
Yeah, I think getting people together, whether that's online or in person, and getting them to contribute to certain things like strategy is incredibly valuable. I do lots of work with teams that does that very thing, and the engagement. People talk about creating engagement in an organization. If you do that, the engagement is so big because they feel they're part of something, or they are a part of. They're contributing, they're changing things, they're adding to things, they're building on things. It's like and it's quite nice that to come through, and also they're hearing each other, aren't they? And so they're starting to spark a little bit, and the motivation levels are just so high. In terms of your leadership, what did anything change from leading in an office through to leading in a remote sense?
Yeah, I guess for me, I guess you need to have quite an adaptable leadership style. It does. It does. It depends on you as an individual. I think in terms of you as a leader, whether this is going to make you resilient or not. If you're the sort of person that needs to be talking to your team all the time, the sort of person that needs to have people around you all the time to feel like work's being done, then obviously this isn't going to kind of suit you in that kind of situation. I guess for me, the biggest thing that it had to kind of, it forced me to change my mentality. I had that kind of, it forces you to measure quality, I would say, of work over like a bums in seats mentality. I think I've worked at companies in the past where it appears like employees are praised for working long hours or just generally sort of being at their desk and looking like they're very, very busy. Whereas I think as a leader, it really forces you to look at, okay, what's the quality of the work that's coming out of the team? Like, in all honesty, and I say this to my team, if they need to go off for 2 hours at the end of the day and have their car serviced, I actually don't care. And you don't even need to tell me. Just, what work that you've got to deliver, what the deadlines are, what we're all working towards as a team, and instilling that kind of environment where it feels like, look, we're all on board. And if you're not delivering and pulling your weight, then ultimately all you're doing is letting the team down as well. So I think it takes a bit of a mind shift. That didn't happen overnight for me. It was a little bit, initially you can find yourself watching Slack or Teams or whatnot, seeing like, okay, who's online? And it's like, whoa, hang on, stop doing that. That's basically that kind of bums in seat mentality that I was just talking about. It's all about, okay, are they delivering the work that they need to be delivering? And is it to the quality that I would expect? So I think it's actually, for me, sort of made quite a positive difference, I guess, as well. And I think a lot of people as leaders worry about the lack of emotional connection that they might have with team members. In my experience, I've still managed to build up some incredible emotional connections with the team members that I have. We talk regularly. Yes, it is over video, but still we have a great connection and very open and honest as team members. So I don't think emotional connections are only limited. And that's the same with the team members with each other as well. It shouldn't only be limited to being in kind of that office environment where that would happen.
And obviously, we talk a lot about people's, I suppose, mental well-being nowadays, and in the work, whether you're in person or you're remote,
Yeah.
there can be some challenges with remote teams, and I just want to understand from your perspective, what are you finding sort of the challenges you get within your leadership or challenging in managing a remote team, whether that's from a mental health point of view or a work productivity point of view as well?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it's for us. We've made it very important that we continually measure employee well-being and satisfaction. So generally, we sort of regularly share an employee satisfaction survey as it's completely anonymous, as a way to kind of get a feel for how the team are feeling. Arguably, that should again also be equally as important in a physical situation, but maybe slightly more so in a remote setting, so that you can get a general sense of how are people feeling. Are they feeling motivated? Are they feeling supported in their goals as a company? Do they feel part of the company? Do they have the tools that they need to do their job? Are they, and also in an emotional state, are they suffering socially, or whatever it might be? So I think you should be continually measuring that. It's something that we are open about in terms of the results. So we go back to our staff and we show them what the results of those surveys are, where we might have improved, maybe where we've lost ground and need to make improvements. And we sort of agree, what changes we're going to make as a business. I think that's really important to show that you've not only listened to people, but you are actioning what they've told you as well. They need to see those results. Then also, I would say that in my experience, the mental well-being of team members can be a little bit harder for more junior members. So I think that the remote setting, in our experience, where we've hired more junior members and they have that appetite and hunger to learn from those around them, and almost kind of learn through osmosis, then that is obviously harder in a remote setting. I think that we also saw that in COVID, right? That I think probably those that were more junior to a role, or the industry maybe, did probably suffer because it was just so much harder to learn from those. So I think for those that are senior and more established, know exactly what is required of them in their role, it's a little bit easier and more straightforward for them than those more junior members.
And do you believe, I'm talking about all sort of office type jobs here, because obviously certain jobs have to be in person. If you're a construction worker, you can't build a house from your home. I'm sure technology will get there with that eventually, but in terms of the ones that are office based, I would say, do you think it's a good idea for everybody to be remote, or do you think that, or is it possible for everybody to be remote?
Yeah, I think this is a really good one. I think for me, there's a lot of difficulties that exist, and I think this is driving some of the things that we're seeing more recently, between businesses taking the stance of no, we're going back 100% office, or no, we're sticking with 100% remote. Those that are really have suffered have been the ones where it's been a mixture of a bit of both. If you imagine yourself as an employee in an organization where, okay, you're in a remote setting and maybe 20% of the workforce are remote and the rest are in office, it can feel like you're not part of something. It's harder to, you have to work harder to make those people feel included. So I think that that's where it creates a bit of a challenge. So I can completely understand why some of the businesses like Amazon are going, no, we're going back 100% office based, because I think it just becomes a little bit more difficult to make sure that everybody's on the bus, if you know what I mean, and that they're all sharing in that kind of same culture. I guess is as well. I think culture is a huge topic. I mean, we could discuss this in itself at length, but in my opinion, culture is not something that you build. You create the framework or environment to allow it to ultimately kind of build itself. So yes, you might set organizational goals or have your own leadership style, but the culture will build itself. I mean, if we take a couple of examples, you could say, I don't know, Patagonia, for example. It's known for having quite a collaborative family culture. It's been built with an emphasis on teamwork, inclusivity, open communication, and they do things like regular team building. I'm sure they have open office layouts, things like that. Or Google, for example, it has that culture of innovation, and they obviously encourage experimentation, creativity, and like thinking outside the box. And they do things like allowing dedicated time for people to work on side projects. So that they are creating the framework for culture to exist. So I think you can do that to a degree as a remote business. You have to work harder for it to create that framework and for the culture to grow. And then it's even harder still, I think, if you've got a mixture of some people in a remote setting and some people in an office setting. to kind of have everybody on board and have that same experience of what they think the culture is as a company. I think it's going to differ depending on the setting that you're in.
And do you think that the benefits of remote or even hybrid? My daughter, she works in an agency in London, and it's hybrid, and she goes in 1 or 2 days a week, but then enables her to come home, move around the country, see friends, and still work. And it's incredibly flexible, obviously, with that. Do you think the benefits of that, and it's not only the only benefits of it, outweigh perhaps the benefits of collaborating and being in person?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it ultimately comes down to you as an individual and what stage in your life you are. I remember back to kind of being in London, working in these large agencies. The social side was equally as important as working in the agencies. You know, I'm not going to lie, the Thursday nights out and the Friday nights out were amazing. And I've made some kind of lifelong friends as a result of that. So there's a definite benefit side in terms of the social. But then equally, you know, it depends on what stage somebody in their life is at. We've got members in our team who have young families. They love the fact that they spend that little bit more time, that they're around their children, that they can finish work and instantly be back in a family kind of environment. So for them, obviously, that benefit massively outweighs the social. So ultimately, I think it depends. I don't know how old your daughter is, but you know, maybe she's at that stage in her life where she wants to be out and socializing and making those lifelong friends. So it is going to be more suited in that situation versus somebody else who's maybe in a different stage.
Because I think there's a balance. I mean, with all this, because I think we as humans we need this interaction socially, and I think that's always the challenge of how you do that. And I know in a context of virtual teams, you have to be a bit more intentional. Well, you have to be intentional everywhere, but I think really intentional about it, because you've got to create those moments, like you've created moments where you bring people together now and again. You do your Friday yay, and then your various stand-ups each in the week, which is really good. Going forward for organizations, and you know, this social piece, this human interaction piece does play a part in resilience, or creating resilience, or not creating resilience. What do you think is the future of work in terms of panning it out over the next sort of 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, difficult one. I think the future of work. I mean, obviously, it depends on the role that you're in. Like you said, if you're in construction, obviously that's going to dictate, you know, a little bit around where you are. But I think for a business like us, where we are tech based, you know, everything, as long as we've got an internet connection, a laptop with the tools that we need, we can pretty much do what we want. So I think in terms of us, the future is that way. I'm not surprised that you have companies like Spotify saying that they're kind of reaffirming their kind of work from anywhere policy. That's obviously, I'm sure, you know, Spotify is a huge organization. I'm sure they continually measure productivity and output of the business, and will have discussed, you know, whether office is based is better for them or not. I think for them long term, obviously, like that's the right fit. So I think it ultimately depends on uh, the company and the fit towards it. But I definitely think we're going to see a shift, as I was saying before, between strong stances on we are remote or we are office based, and less of the kind of hybrid. Or if you're going with hybrid, making it absolutely clear on which days, you know, they want people in the office, because it's just not useful. You know, you hear of people, okay, great, I've made the effort to go into the office today. All I've done is sit on Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams calls, speaking to people that are at home. That's not, you're not building up social connections and things that way,
No.
are you? So, you know, whether that's the company saying, right, you know, Monday and Tuesday, for example, we are all in the office and the rest of the week we can be remote. You know, that's another, I just think that we're going to see more and more businesses, you know, solidifying exactly, you know, what their stance is long term.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think that sort of structured approach and being a bit more, more prescriptive, I guess, in terms of that, I think is probably quite helpful if we're trying to create those moments, because you know, bringing people together in person, there's something about that. You know, I've worked with teams, and I still work with teams online and offline, and I, you know, I can manage. You know, I work with for years on the online piece, but actually in person, there's something about that in terms of managing that and the interaction that goes with that. But we're in a new sort of state of the future of work in terms of how people have got opportunities and ideas and ways of being more flexible, and which is fantastic. Really enjoyed your insights, James. Thank you for coming on the show. If people want to sort of connect with you, get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, good question. Probably LinkedIn. I've been doing quite a bit of kind of thought leadership video content on LinkedIn, so hopefully that's also beneficial to people. So please, just look me up, James Marshall, Managing Director at Spinning Fox. I'm sure there's plenty of James Marshalls out there, but hopefully that will help narrow it down for you. So please do connect, and if anybody's got any questions as well off the back of what we've discussed here, feel free to ask away.
Well, thank you for being on the show today, James.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to be here.